we have the latest issue of Miracles Magazine is also out. And this picture, you open it all up so you can see the whole picture on the front, right? The whole thing is taken by another great photographer, Brad Olvin, who's over here.
I didn't shoot it.
You didn't shoot this? Oh, you did too. Just got it at the right time, right? Isn't that a great picture of the Brooklyn Bridge? All right. So just a little bit of instruction before we get started today. First of all, I guess you all have seen, excuse me, that the new book, Perfect Happiness, Lesson 101 Perfect is out. And I need to talk a little bit about it before. It's normally it's $18, but for you it's $15, okay, for attending class. It's not quite out, but I mean, it's not in the bookstore yet, but it will be in the bookstores. They're saying May 20th, although some are saying May 5th, which is like tomorrow, so depends on where you're at. I'm going to tell you about something that happened with regard to the book. So last October, I was sent the copy for the cover to approve. And I made some changes in it. For one thing, it said on the back that Lesson 101 was probably the most important lesson in the course. And I wrote back and I said, no, well, you can't really say that Lesson 101 is the most important lesson in the course because it would be really hard to do. Say which one's the most important. They're all really important. Number one. I mean, if you get number one, you're going a long ways in terms of understanding this. That may be the most important one in the whole book, right? Nothing I see means anything, right? So anyhow, I sent off these changes. And then in January, it started appearing on Amazon.com for pre-order. And then a friend sent me an email saying, do you know what they're saying about you on Amazon.com? And I said, no, what? And she says, it says you're the master teacher of A Course in Miracles. Right. And I said, oh no, oh goodness, no. You know, we're all absolutely equal here. If you say that, you don't understand what the teachings of the Course in Miracles are. So I immediately sent off a letter to the email to the publisher and say, please don't say that. Take that off of there. And it did. It disappeared from the website. It didn't say Master Teacher of A Course in Miracles. Then I got the box of books in the mail, and I opened it, and it says on the very first word, Master Teacher of A Course in Miracles. So on an ego level, this is embarrassing, because this is just not, I would never, ever, ever say that. So I hope you'll understand, and whoever's watching this will understand, etc., that then I fired back, you must reprint this cover. And they fired back, too late, it's already being distributed. So it will be reprinted for the next run, but there's already 5,000 copies out there in the world. So I read a line in the Course this morning that said something to the effect of that even things that we don't understand happen for a reason. And I don't understand why this happened, but there must be some sort of reason. That's the reason. Well, thanks. A little bit about today. We're going to do today a little bit differently. Today is Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is the shortest chapter in the Course. It's only 10 pages long. 10 is 10 pages long. The idea that's contained in here, though the idols of sickness is an important idea, and I want to say a little bit about what that idea is, and then I'm going to do it's like a prepared talk or speech. So I'm going to ask for no questions during the first hour. I mean, up until we take our break. After we come back from the break, if you want to, we'll start off. I'll say if there are any questions based on what we did. And then we'll go into Chapter 10 at that point. I'm not really going to start Chapter 10, although I'm going to be talking about the ideas in Chapter 10. Let me just say something about what the major ideas are that's in Chapter 10. The major idea, the idol of sickness. The major idol of sickness, of course, is the ego itself. I mean, the whole idea that there is an ego. The whole idea that we could get caught in this illusory world of the ego. That's the sickness itself, which disappears once we are able to awaken to the truth of the reality of who we really are. Right? And then among the idols of sickness, this would include what the Course talks about. It doesn't start talking about till chapter 18, which is special relationships. Now let's talk a little bit about what special relationships are. Special relationships in the first place are our projections. That is, it's the stuff that we throw out there onto the world, which we hold so dearly to and which we think are so very real and important. This would include our relationship with other people. It includes, first of all, primarily the relationship we have with ourselves and the relationship we have with our body. Now we all have let's be honest, we all have special relationships with our bodies. We love them, we hate them, they're not good enough to be who we are, or something, we feel trapped in them, whatever, but it's a special relationship for sure, right? For good or for ill, it's a special, for the positive, overdoing the emphasis on the body is a special relationship, underplaying it is a special relationship. Being sick all the time creates a special relationship with it. I didn't mean anything by that. So those are the primary ways that we're going to be looking at special relationships. And we'll get to that later. So I want to start, actually this is kind of based on a talk that I've done in the past. It's called I'm Nobody, Who Are You? It's a way of looking at our special relationships. And I want to start with a line from the Course which says, prepare you now for the undoing of what never was. So what never was, of course, is the ego. This is the illusory dream that we get so very caught in. Actually, let me tell you about a dream, first of all, that I had just recently, 2 dreams. They relate to the Course. The first one was about a week and a half or so ago. I dreamed, maybe I told you this, I'm not sure. I dreamed that I was driving a car with my eyes closed. So that was kind of a scary dream, right? You're driving a car with your eyes closed, and I knew that what I had to do, first I had to stop the car, and then I had to open my eyes, and I'd be safe, right? So do you ever have one of these dreams where you're like forcing yourself to do, you're forced, so it was like I was forcing myself to wake up, to open my eyes. Well, I succeeded in stopping the car in the dream, and then I forced myself to open, and the minute I forced myself, I was awake, literally awake. My eyes were open, and the dream was gone. This is what the Course is about. Then I had another one this morning, early, and in the one this morning, I dreamed that I had parked my car in a garage here in New York City, and when I went to get it, they wouldn't give me my car. And there was all this frustration about why couldn't I have my car back, and the guy kept disappearing that was supposed to get me the car, etc. So it was this really frustrating thing. And then once again, I realized the way to get out of this frustrating experience was to wake up. To literally open my eyes. And so I forced it and literally woke up, and the dream was gone. We're going to see this in chapter 10, where it talks about the dreaming of the world. We're going to get into that in just a moment. But so anyhow, what we're awakening from is we're awakening from an illusion. I probably have said here in the past that I think one of the things that's going to happen to us, all of us, when we actually leave these bodies behind forever, is it's going to be a little bit like waking up in the morning, at which point we'll realize that the whole thing was just, we can turn to our friends and say, I just had the strangest dream. And then it'll be whatever it was, right? But we'll let it go. It's going to say we just let it go with the same degree of facility that we let go of last night's dream once we awaken from that, because we realize what we awaken to is reality, and what we're letting go of is an illusion. Okay? So, I'm Nobody, Who Are You? I want us to start with a little story, joke. You may have heard this. It's a story about a minister of a large church who goes into the chapel and he kneels down and he says, Lord, I'm nobody. I'm so nobody. The associate minister is walking by, sees the senior minister in there on his knees, here's what he says, goes in there, kneels down next to him, says, Lord, I too am nobody. I'm so nobody. Some of you know this, you're laughing already. The custodian's walking by, sees the two ministers in there, here's what they say, goes in, kneels down next to the associate, and says, Lord, I too am nobody. I'm so nobody. The associate minister opens his eyes, sees the custodian next to him, taps the senior minister in the side and says, look who thinks he's nobody. So the truth of the matter is that we're all nobody. But there's a certain kind of freedom, the freedom from this thought that we are this very special thing that we call whatever name that we give to this kind of identity we think we have. There's a line in the Course, it comes chapter 24, it says, you are not special, and if you think that you are, and you would defend your specialness against the truth of what you really are, then how could you know the truth? Right? I'll say it again. You are not special. If you think that you are, and you would defend your specialness against the truth of who you really are, how can you know the truth? Right? So this specialness, this idea of specialness, which is there for all of us in some way, is becomes a major block to the awareness of love's presence, right? And the psychotherapy pamphlet, there's a line that says, do not forget that any form of specialness must be a defense and will be a defense, right? Okay. And one quote from Ram Dass. It says, in most of our human relationships, we spend much of our time reassuring one another that our costume of identity are on straight. Isn't that nice? He's so bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest that there's 4 ways, there's more than 4, but 4 ways that we could think of ourselves as being special, and that each of these ways of being special become sicknesses or blocks to the awareness of love's presence. So what we're trying to do is to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. The first one I'll talk about is the most obvious of all. This is the one that the man on the street would understand as being special. And that is that you're special because you're hot. You drive a really fancy car. You make a lot of money. You got all kinds of letters and degrees after your name. You're a VIP. Right? By the way, one of the things you would really not like to be is famous. Really famous people can have very difficult lives, especially the ones that the paparazzis chase around after. They don't stand very much of a chance at real happiness. We think of somebody like Princess Diana, Anna Nicole Smith, Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe, maybe I've told you this, 2 months before she died, did an interview for Life magazine, which was tape recorded, it wasn't filmed. And a couple of years ago, and some of you may have seen this, PBS did a special on the great photographs of Marilyn Monroe that have been taken by a variety of different photographers. And as they're showing all these great photographs of Marilyn Monroe, they're playing this tape in the background of this interview that she made, again, 2 months before she died. And what she says in this tape is that she does not know who Marilyn Monroe is. She says it's like a cardboard kind of a thing. It's something Hollywood made up. And she's crying when she talks about it. And she says, and I went along with it. I let him do it. But it isn't me. She says, I don't know who it is. She says, I'm not a sex goddess. A sex goddess is a thing. I am not a thing. I'm a person. I'm just Norma Jean. But Norma Jean got lost in a myth. A myth. Marilyn Monroe is said to have reached mythic proportions. So guess what happens if you reach mythic proportions? You're a myth. I mean, it's tough enough just being a regular, ordinary human being in this world. And then the whole world supports the myth, right? So if the whole world supports the myth, I mean, what do you do? How do you find any kind of freedom or any kind of happiness as everybody's literally chasing around after you and putting you up there on this pedestal, right? Some of you know Dr. David Hawkins, who died about a year ago, a year and a half ago, I guess it was now. In one of his books, he says, routinely, famous people discover that being famous is onersome and burdensome to them once the novelty of the thing has worn off. I mean, in the beginning, it's kind of a novelty. It's sort of maybe fun for a while, but once the novelty's worn off, then it's not much fun at all anymore. Now, every once in a while, I might add that you might get someone who doesn't go along with the myth. And one good example of that was Albert Einstein, who really saw above the whole thing, so he was able to not take... Remember the great picture of him with his tongue sticking out of the photographers, right? So he wasn't going to take this whole thing seriously, right? And he knew enough to rise above it. So one possibility is that you're really into an illusion of thinking that something is real that's not real. We all have the illusion, actually. We all think that something is real which isn't real, but in this particular case, you can see how it becomes a real trap, a real case where it's really very, very difficult to break free of it. I stayed with a woman once. I travel around doing some lectures here and there, and I was staying in Spring, Texas. And I don't always know who I'm going to be staying with. I went to meet my hostess. I was going to speak at a church on Sunday. So on Saturday, I meet the hostess for that I'm going to stay with. And we went out to have dinner. And while we're sitting having dinner, you know how there's often a TV up over the bar area in a restaurant? Well, we're sitting in such a way that you can see the TV in the background. And she says, "There's my son on TV." I didn't know who her son was. And she told me, she says, "You know, he's the MVP in baseball, the most valuable player." I'm not a baseball person, so I didn't know who it was, all right? She said, "He is the unhappiest man." I said, "What?" She said, "You're staying in one of his 7 houses tonight," right? She says, by the way, he's 6'8", I'm 5'8", and when sleeping in his bed, everything was special made for him in the house. So I walk up to the sink is like this. You know, everything's special made. So she says, "He's the unhappiest man." I said, "Why? Well, how could he be the unhappiest man?" She said, "Well, because he was MVP last year, and this year he's on a losing team. So they're not even going to get into the playoffs. So what if your identity depended upon whether or not you got into, your happiness depended upon whether or not you were in the playoffs, right?" So this is just one kind of specialness, right? There's more. The other extreme of specialness, this is you're special because you're hot. The other kind of specialness is because you're not hot. It's completely opposite of that. It's woe is me, and look at all my difficulties, and look at all my problems, and look how I have been dumped on, and I just have all of the weight of the world has fallen onto my shoulders. I've often said if you could get one lesson in the course and really get it, really, really get one lesson, one that would be really, really good would be lesson 31, which is I am not a victim of the world I see. If you really get, I'm not a victim of the world I see, we're really going a long way in studying what this course is all about. There's a line in the course that says, "My brothers and yours are constantly engaged in justifying the unjustifiable," justifying their victimhood, right? Some of you remember Hank Williams, the original Hank Williams, not Hank Williams Jr., but Hank Williams Sr. As you know, he had a number of #1 hits. And he was once being interviewed by a DJ, and the DJ said to him, "Hank, you've had a number of #1 hits. Why do you think that's so? And he says, these are country western songs, right? He says, well, everybody feels good about feeling bad. Now you, yeah, you're laughing because it's true, right? I mean, we kind of like to get in there and wallow in our badness, you know, and the bad feelingness that's going on. That kind of makes us real in some sort of unreal way, all right? And Lily Tomlin once said that she thought that talking was invented to satisfy man's need to complain. So, once again, I had gone out to give a talk at, this time in Dallas. And I go and I get a rental car. I'm driving to the host family's house. And I didn't have any CDs with me. I turned the radio on in the car. It's on a country western channel. I don't usually listen to country western, but I thought, what the heck, I'm in Texas. I've got a half-hour drive. I'll listen to country western, right? So with one major exception, and there was one major exception, every song was a somebody done me wrong kind of a song. Right? Right? So now here's some actual lines from country western songs. My wife ran off with my best friend, and I sure do miss him. I'm so miserable without you, it's almost like you were here. I liked you better before I got to know you so well. How can I miss you if you won't go away? I keep forgetting I forgot about you. And if you don't leave me alone, I'll go find somebody who will. So that's the kind of specialness that puts us in the lower down, unpleasant kind of feeling, right? The Course in Miracles consists of right at 500,000 words, 500,000 words, right? Actually, if you include the pamphlets, it's over 500,000 words, 500,000. In that entire text, the word beware appears one time, just once out of 500,000 words. And the only time it appears, some of you probably know, is in the sentence which says, beware of the temptation to perceive yourself as being unfairly treated. See, a lot of you knew it, were able to mouth it along with me. Beware of the temptation to perceive yourself as being unfairly treated, right? And again, I read a passage earlier this morning that said, and I'm just paraphrasing it, but that it was trying to help us become aware that every single thing that comes our way, there's nothing which doesn't happen for a reason. Nothing. Even some of the worst things that we say, I remember when I had cancer, the first thing I thought of when I got the diagnosis several years ago was, no, I did not put this into my script. This is not a plan. This is not in the program. I had it, so it was in the program, right? It was there. It was. You have to deal with it. Right? So these are two ways. One is you're special because you're hot. The other is special because you're not hot. And there's a third way that we might think of ourselves as being special, and this is special because of our opinions, our attitude, our beliefs. We're a little bit higher. We can see things a little bit more clearly than other people do, right? I like the way that Françoise Renée de Chateaubriand says, you are not special just because you can see the world in an odious light. Sometimes we like that. And also the way that German scientist George Christopher Lichtenberg says, nothing is more conducive to peace of mind than not having an opinion. Not having an opinion. The Course is about, it's about peace of mind. This is the whole purpose of the Course, is about obtaining peace of mind. Right? This is the goal of the Course, is peace of mind. And peace of mind, by the way, the Course says, comes to an open mind. Right? Peace comes to the open mind, non-projective. In other words, you can't be projective and receptive at the same time, right? So as long as I'm being projective, I'm really unhappy because I'm projecting the world I see and I'm not liking the world that I'm seeing either, okay? So not having an opinion. By the way, do you know what the difference is between a crow and a raven? The difference between a crow and a raven is that crows have got these 4 long feathers that come off the tip into their wings. Those are called pinions. And a raven, rather than have 4, has 5. So it's just a matter of opinion. Oh. Yeah, that's a groaner. I'm sorry about that. And the Buddhists have a saying, do not seek enlightenment. I think I've shared this one. Do not seek enlightenment. Simply cease to cherish opinions. Simply cease to cherish opinions, right? Okay. So, you could think you're special because you're hot, because you're not hot, because of your opinions or your attitudes, the way you see things. A 4th way that I'm going to suggest that we can also think of ourselves as being special, and Course in Miracles students have really got to watch out for this one, and that's that you're special because you're spiritual. You're a good person. This is called spiritual specialness, right? You got to watch out for spiritual. You meditate, you pray, you read the Course, you do yoga, you eat a clean diet, you're not judgmental, so you're better than those judgmental people. There's a story about 4 Zen students. I don't know if I've done this or not, but 4 Zen students decide to go into a week of silent meditation together. They sit down. A couple of hours go by, and one of them says, I wonder if I remembered to turn off the stove. To which the second one says, you idiot, you have spoken. We had agreed not to speak. To which a third one says, and now what are you thinking about? You two have spoken. To which a 4th one says, I'm the only one who's not spoken. So this is spiritual specialness, right? According to the Tao Te Ching, if we think we have some clear knowledge of the Tao, we don't understand the Tao. Right? There's more for us to learn, right? And again, Dr. David Hawkins says there's nothing deadlier than a religionized ego, right? And that's, I think one of the most difficult individuals I ever ran across in my life was a really good person who had a really mean mind, right? So that's some of the things that we're not. So let's talk about where we want to be going with this, right? Not thinking of ourselves as being special. You've heard me say before that the basic difference between a mystic and an ordinary person is that the ordinary individual, which includes almost all of us almost all the time, we are projectors. So we're making up the world. We're always making up the world. The idea is to be able to stop that, just so that we can see. You can't be projective and receptive at the same time. If we're going to be receptive, we've got to come to the quiet mind. Right? I want to read you a description of a mystical experience. It's only about 4 sentences long. It's from Ralph Waldo Emerson. It's in his book Nature, which some of you may know was his first major book that really made him famous. Right? And by the way, just the thing about Emerson. Emerson quit the church after just 3 years of being a minister, and then he started giving lectures. And he said he found out that he could get more people to show up and pay him for giving a lecture on Tuesday evening than would show up at church on Sunday morning. Interesting how that works. Anyhow, here's the quote from Emerson. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed in the blithe air, and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of universal being pass through me. I am part and parcel of God. That's a great description of a mystical experience. Right? Just standing on the bare ground, head bathed in the blithe air, uplift into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. About the egotism again, and one of the reasons why it's so inappropriate to say master teacher of A Course in Miracles. I was doing the workbook recently, and I was on lesson 319. And 319, the title of the workbook, lesson 319, it sounds like incredible egotism, but when you read it, you know, it's just exactly the opposite. It's, I am the salvation of the world. You know how you got those, I am the salvation of the world, right? And then you read down what it says in the text. Well, actually, let me read it for you, right? It says, here's a great line. It says, arrogance opposes truth. Arrogance opposes truth. It's again, how can you know the truth and be arrogant at the same time? But I want to read you just a little bit more than the first sentence there. Give me a second. Let me read you the whole first little paragraph here. So, here's a thought from which all arrogance has been removed. I am the salvation of the world. And only truth remains. For arrogance opposes truth. But where there is no arrogance, the truth will come immediately and fill in the space the ego left unoccupied by lies. Okay? Arrogance opposes truth, but where there is no arrogance, the truth will come immediately and fill in the space the ego left unoccupied by lies. So the lies are all the story that's going on that we think is true, which has nothing to do with who we are. And while we're doing I'm Nobody, do you all know the I'm Nobody from Emily Dickinson, Ralph Waldo Emerson's contemporary, right? Interesting enough, you may know that Emily Dickinson almost never left the home that she grew up in. Strangely enough, once Ralph Waldo Emerson came to give a lecture at Amherst where she lived, and she didn't go, even though he was her hero. Isn't that amazing? She has a poem that's called I'm Nobody. Some of you know it. If you know it, I'm going to say it, so mouth it with me, okay? It goes like this. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. They'd banish us, you know. How boring to be somebody. How public, like a frog, to say your name the whole day long to some admiring bog. So that's Emily Dickinson and Emerson at the same time, right? So if we're none of these things that the ego would tell us that we are, then who are we, right? Do any of you know we? No? He was a really good writer from the early part of the 20th century. His real name was Terence Gray. He was an Englishman, but he was a Taoist, and so after he became a Taoist, he changed his name to Wei, which actually means, I think, non-meddlesome action in Chinese. And he's got a saying that goes, why are you unhappy? Because 99.9% of everything you do and everything you think and everything you say is about yourself, and there isn't one. See, that's the myth. The myth that keeps us unhappy, the myth of the self. That's the sickness that the ego, the idol of sickness that chapter 10 is talking about. 99.9% of everything you do and everything you think and everything you say is about yourself, and there isn't one. This is the total mythology, right? And here's another great quote. This is from one of my favorite mystics. His name was Angelus Silesius. Angelus Silesius was a physician, priest, mystic from the 16th century. And it goes like this. This is so good. I think this should be on a wall in a church somewhere. We'll put one on the wall here. It goes like this. God, whose love is everywhere, can come to visit unless you're not there. Okay? God, whose love is everywhere, can't come to visit unless you're not there. We are so there. We are so into our heads, we are so into thinking and interpreting and analyzing and projecting and judging that we can't see anything. So that's why the Course is trying to help us to stop that. To stop this, actually to stop the insanity. And it does talk a good bit about it. It talks about insanity in chapter 10, right? Some of you, I know that there are some here, can remember Don Juan, Carlos Castaneda series, right? Yeah, good, good. I find as I talk to young people, and if I bring the name up, they like look like they don't know, right? But we're in Greenwich Village, and we're old enough that we can remember the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, right? There's a point in, I think it's Journey to Exile, where Don Juan says to his student Carlos, I know all kinds of things because, and he gives 4 reasons. 1, says he doesn't have a personal history. And Carlos thinks about that, and that's true. He knows nothing about Don Juan's past. He could be somebody else. He could be making up whatever it is that he's told him, right? He doesn't know about where he's from or his family because he hasn't talked about that, right? So but we have a personal past. And not only do we have a personal past, but we are constantly kind of reinforcing that past. And we're living, and of course we spend a tremendous amount of time living in the past, kind of going over it and over it and over it again, right? It says 2, he doesn't feel any more important than anyone else. And number 3, he says, my death is sitting right here over my left shoulder. Says you get a little too cocky, a little too arrogant, turn and look at your death. And death will say, I haven't touched you yet. Right? So, so the past, let me read you a quote about the past from A Course in Miracles. This is from chapter 14, which we're going to be coming up to onto soon. Your past is what you taught yourself. Let it all go. Do not attempt to understand any event or anything or anyone in its light, for the darkness in which you try to see can only obscure. Put no confidence at all in darkness to illuminate your understanding, for if you do, you contradict the light and thereby think you see the darkness. Yet darkness cannot be seen, for it is nothing more than a condition in which seeming becomes impossible. When you read a lot of these near-death experiences that people are having, that we've been reading lately, and it's really a letting go of whatever it is that one is holding on to, which means that all of the stuff that we thought was real, all the stuff we thought was so important, all that past stuff that we've been carrying with us has just been weight, it's just been garbage that's been totally unnecessary in order to really awaken to the truth, the reality of who we are. And I like the way Gangaji, yeah, I can say that. Gangaji says, I am not bound by the story of me. So if we're bound by the story, if we're caught in the story, then the story defines us, and then we can't see who we are. The Course is trying to help us find out who we really are, outside of the dimensions of the story. And A.H. Almaas, some of you know A.H. Almaas, he's a contemporary teacher, mystic, says, I learn a great deal of what I truly am when I'm not trapped in the particularities of personal life and history. I am then the unchanging background witnessing. The Course talks a lot about witnessing and seeing and watching and observing. And Ken, I notice, spends a lot of time talking about looking. Just looking and just seeing. I mean, seeing the story and seeing the game and seeing the play and seeing the drama, seeing the soap opera, and just seeing it but not being involved in it. Because the minute we get involved in it, then it's the ego that's obviously involved in it, and then we can't see because of all the stuff that's going on. Again, another quote from A Course in Miracles says, "A concept of the self is made by you. It bears no likeness to yourself at all. It is an idol." What we're talking about here is an idol, made to take the place of your reality as a son of God. So we're going to be looking at this idol that we all create, which takes the place of the true identity that we have. And don't we know that? I mean, don't we feel that? I mean, isn't there something inside us that says that this isn't real, that somehow or another we have kind of created this image or the idol? And the more that gets created, the more struggle there is in trying to be able to overcome that at some point along the way. A lot of the mystics, like Meister Eckhart, uses words like desert and barren and empty and the void, the great emptiness that they go into when they have their experiences, where there's no, if you will, particularities about, see, why can't you meditate? Because, well, we sit down and meditate, and what happens, of course, is all the stuff, it's all the story comes in. So we don't have the emptiness because we got, oh, you know, you forgot to do so-and-so. Oh, you don't forget to, when you stop meditating, remember, you got to do that, you know. You're laughing because it's true, right? Because you've had that experience, you're meditating and think, oh, I should keep a list. Call so-and-so when you're done meditating, right? All the stuff that comes in there and fills up the mind, right? And do some of you know Sarnagatata? Nasargadatta? Or he's a Hindu who just died a few years ago. He says, "I ask only you to stop imagining that you were born, have parents, are a body, will die, and so on. Just try it. Make a beginning. It's not as hard as you think." He's talking about the empty mind, right? And another word the Course talks about it uses the word open mind. And also when you study the 10 characteristics of a teacher of God that's in the Manual for Teachers of A Course in Miracles, they're in order. There's a reason why 1 is 1 and 2 is 2 and 3 is 3, and it says so as you go through them. So maybe after we get this all done, we'll go over the 10 characteristics of a teacher of God. The last characteristic of a teacher of God is open-mindedness. And it's total open-mindedness. And what it actually, the first line of it says, open-mindedness, perhaps the last characteristic a teacher of God develops. Isn't that interesting? Perhaps the last characteristic a teacher of God, because it's total open-mindedness. So there's no prejudice, and there's no projection, and we're not putting anything onto the world. One of the major things we're not doing is we're not trying to fix other people. We're not trying to fix the world, right? We're kind of letting the world be. A friend said to me this week about another friend, I won't say who this is, but just said in reference to another guy, said, he's always chasing something. And I thought about that, and I thought, that's true. How can you always be chasing something? If we're always chasing something, we're not really finding something, we're chasing something. Yeah. The Course has enabled us to find out the truth of what's really going on. And then just a couple more quotes from the Course, and I'll kind of wrap this up. The death of specialness is not your death, but your awakening into life eternal. You but emerge from an illusion of what you are to the acceptance of yourself as God created you. Now, what could be nicer than the acceptance of the self as God created you? Because everything else is an illusion. Everything else is an illusion. The name is an illusion. There are no doctors, there are no reverends, there are no captains, there are no lieutenants in heaven. I think that's an impossible. Those are things we make up in this world. We make it up, and then we think that there's some sort of reality to it. There's a story about a guy who dies, his car goes to heaven, he's standing at the pearly gates, and he sees this little guy running around the pearly gates wearing a white smock and a stethoscope around his neck. He says, who's that little guy running around here? Is that a doctor? And he says, no, that's God. He just likes to play doctor. Okay. One more quote from the Course. It says, while you think that part of you is separate, the concept of oneness, joined as oneness, is meaningless. This is a very important concept in the Course, that there's just one mind. But and it's not about joining the mind with that mind. It's a matter of realizing that that one mind has always existed, and that you've always been part of that one mind. You don't join it. You recognize that you're already part of it. Right? It's already there, and you're already part of it. That's the awakening. That's an exciting awakening, which is the kind of awakening that we all want to come to. I'll close with a little story about once I'd gone out to have dinner with a friend, and you notice sometimes when you're out there, you can't help but hear the conversation at the next table, all right? So this was a conversation between an older man and his wife. And the man had had a revelatory experience, and he wanted to share it with his wife. And he said, honey, I had a revelation today. You know what? He said, we're all just people here. And she said, do you think we ought to wallpaper or paint the bathroom? And he said, no, listen, you're not hearing me. You know, I had this revelation today. You know, we're all just people here. And she said, do you think it should be blue or yellow? And he said, no, listen, honey. I had this revelation. We're all just people here. We'll take a break. Okay, let's look at chapter. Have you got your little booklets? Barry, I knew you'd have a question. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you know you're having an experience of God?
You know. You know because you know. You know without doubt. You know without question. It's not like am I or am I not.
It's like if you have to ask, then you're not.
There you go.
If you have to ask, then you're not. If you are, then you know.
It's like saying, are you in love? And you say, I'm not sure, or I don't know. Well, then you're not. Because if you are, you know.
I guess I can say, therefore, I had 2 experiences. I was led to believe that it was something out of the ordinary.
Sure it was.
But I soon forgot about it, so I guess my ego started taking over, and
that's not
it wasn't
unusual.
like it was something I'll never forget.
There you go.
But I never followed through on it. I guess my ego overwhelmed me or something like that.
You know, I think you're making a good point in that a lot of us have those kinds of experiences. I mean, a lot of folks have these experiences, but if no effort is made to like kind of record it or think about it or look at it more deeply, am I echoing somehow or another? I think maybe it's because of the mic. Then it does kind of disappear. It can't disappear completely though, because if it disappeared completely, you wouldn't even be able to talk about it. So it's back there. A lot of this is especially true in childhood. That we have these kind of mystical moments of children have this a lot actually, and then but it gets lost along the way because life takes over, and the externals of life take over, and it sort of dissipates. It never maybe quite goes away completely, but that's not all unusual.
Well, I asked one of the teachers who's prominent in the field of Buddhism, which is what I practice. I told him, I said, in the year 2000 and the year 2007, I had these experiences, but now they're ancient history. What can I do to have experiences like that again.
Yeah.
He said, meditate.
I
Keep
knew.
meditating.
Yeah. Well, that's the Buddhist answer, which is right. You know, it's not saying, you know,
It's a very important part of my life, I'm meditating. I find it gives me, calms my mind down.
Yes, of course.
But I haven't had one of those experiences.
Lately, yeah.
And
The Course
I take
in Miracles.
it seriously.
The Course in Miracles, by the way, it's about healing the mind, right? It's about getting us back to a whole mind. But that also occurs not just with something like meditation. There's nothing wrong with meditation. No, don't tell me that's just a really good idea, especially if it's going to help you to have a more open mind. But ultimately speaking, what we really do is healing all of our relationships, so that all of our relationships, so there's no problems in the world in relationship. But it's not that that can't help. So let's look at chapter 10. So this is called the Idols of Sickness. And I really just begin this with the first two of the 10 Commandments, because the first two of the 10 Commandments from the Bible are about what we really want. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, and thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images or likeness of anything that is heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the waters under the earth. And now immediately you realize in the third sentence here that this isn't God. Because we said all of a sudden, for I, the Lord their God, am a jealous God, visiting with the iniquities of the fathers into the children of the third. And now the ego's God has taken over already this early on, right? We got a God that blames and attacks and is jealous. God does not have an ego. So if God doesn't have an ego, how in the world could God be jealous? Jealousy is a human trait. The Course in Miracles says, thou shalt have no other gods before him, because there are none. There are no other gods. It would be impossible to be something outside the realm of God. And then also, quoting the Course, God is not jealous of the gods you made, but you are. You would save them and serve them because you believe that they made you. You think they are your father because you are projecting onto them the fearful fact that you made them to replace God. Yet when they seem to speak to you, remember that nothing can replace God, and whatever replacements you have attempted are nothing. In that sense, the whole world is nothing. It's all something that we've made up. And then we get very, very caught on this whole imagery of what it is that we've made up. And again, the main thing that we've made up is this false concept that we call an ego, which has absolutely no reality at all. And I reflect here on the story of Narcissus, who I'm sure you all are familiar with from Greek mythology, who falls in love with his own image in a pool, not realizing that it's an image. That's the important point. The important point is that we don't realize that it's just an image, or it's just a story. It's not a reality, right? So in that sense, there will be no Jon Mundy in heaven, or you, or anyone in heaven. Now that doesn't mean that you're not already a part of heaven. You are already a part, but not as a dream, not as a dream character. That will go away, and that's very scary to the ego. But the truth of the matter is that's very liberating to spirit, because spirit is no longer hemmed down and held down by the drama, by the story that we thought was a real story. Okay. I think it's interesting that my wife likes to watch American Idol. You know, we want to create the idols, right? So it's like who among these young folks will become the next Madonna, the next Cher, the next Michael Jackson, the next whatever it is. And you kind of, well, you can understand why they're interested in doing it. Anybody's interested in trying to utilize their talents in the best way that they possibly can. But then we're running into this danger of creating something that really isn't real, and we go for that, right? So as I said, special relationships are one of the main way that we create these idols. We can make somebody else into an idol. We can make our own image into an idol, and it can be for good or ill. There's two basic kind of special relationships, of course, Marcus talks about. So the two basic kinds of special relationships are special love and special hate, right? And special hate, that's really clear because we know who the special hate is. I think it was interesting, back during the the 70s and the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the Russians were we hated the Russians and they hated us, right? And then the wall came down and things changed. Now there's still a little battle going on, but it's not the same dimension. We're not thinking that they're going to blow us off the face of the earth or we're going to blow them off the face of the earth. But that's kind of a special hate relationship, which sometimes are easier to change than special love relationships, because special love relationships have more of a masquerade to them. And it's because, after all, it's special love, right? So this is what happens in parent-child relationships and husbands and wives relationships, etc., where we really want to be loving, but there's a lot of other stuff that's going on underneath that we're wanting to fix or to change the other somehow or another. And the Course is very much asking us not to do that. I mean, not to get caught up in the illusion of thinking that you can change somebody, right? Remember that the quote I've shared with you before from the Course, if I interfere between your thoughts and their results, remember that line? If I interfere between your thoughts and their results, I'd be interfering with the most basic law there is in the universe. The most basic law there is in the universe is the law of cause and effect. So we can't, that's why the only thing you can change, and I'll probably have to say this every month, the only thing that you can change is your mind. So the only thing that we can change is the way we see things. So behind Barry, you want to hand the mic to the lady behind you? Okay. Yeah.
Is a special love relationship really a special hate relationship?
You could see it that way. I'm sure in some conditions that would be a special hate relationship. Sure.
Okay.
But it masks as special love, right? I wouldn't want to say that that's like a firm thing, because it could just be a special love relationship that we have trouble with. Mm-hmm. For a whole variety of reasons, right? Okay. Page 3. So the most special relationship we all have, I already mentioned, or one of the most special ones, is the relationship we have with our bodies, right? Because they look, well, first of all, it's such a trap, the body. And it looks so much like this is who we are, because, well, you feel it. You look at it in a mirror. You see it. You identify with it. If it's sick, that you're really identified with it. We spend a lot of time talking about my body and my relationship with my body. Billy?
Yeah, last weekend I was in a hotel.
You can, take the mic. You can take it back to Billy.
Well, last weekend I was in a hotel. And the worst thing you can have is a three-way mirror to see every angle of your body. That I had to say.
Three-dimensional, right?
Too much of your body, right?
Too much of the body. That's more than you really wanted to see, right? That's why we wear clothes. Really, I mean, that is why we wear clothes. I mean, clothes are for protection, of hiding, and more than, we weld it for weather, but if the weather was not a factor, we use them to hide, right? Behind the body, behind the clothes, right? And yet, the Course says from chapter 18, in no single instant does the body exist at all. Isn't that an interesting line? At no single instant does it actually exist at all. It is always remembered or anticipated, but never experienced just now. Only its past and future seem real. So that's why we're either hanging on to the past, rehearsing the past, going over the story, or worrying. Worry is what we have in the future. Worrying, what if these different catastrophes would somehow or another happen to my life or to my body? Not that they're occurring now. It's never now, right? But it's always the what-ifs, all the worries about what happens if your mate dies? What happens if you get sick? What if you don't have a job? What if there's nobody to take care of you? and none of which is true at the moment. Right? It's always what if. We have the what if and if only. Those are the two we're going back and forth on. Right? If only's in the past. If only I'd made a series of different choices. You ever beat yourself up about that? Oh, why the hell did I say that? And if only I'd done this, or if only I'd... And that's just guilt. That's guilt. So we're holding on to guilt in the past, and our relationship with the future is one of fear. We got guilt here and fear here. Guilt holds me back into the stupid choices that I made, and fear is things that haven't even happened that I'm throwing my problems onto. Yes, Kim, you want to get a mic to Kim? Trying to steal that, Tina?
I just
Take
wanted
the
to say
mic.
that
I know.
I thought she was trying to take it.
Yeah, I thought so too.
when you release yourself to realization that you have no self-identity separate from God and everything, it's the end of everything you're talking about right now.
Right.
That's the cost of realizing that you share being with all the universe.
Good.
And you are nothing and no one special, but you in fact are everything. You lose the past and the future, all worries, all regrets, all fear. The idea of guilt evaporates. And
Right.
yeah.
That's great.
It's you know, Jesus even says, there's a line in the Course, you know, here's the deal. You get everything for nothing. You know, what are you waiting for? What are you holding on to, these miserable
Right.
stories? Anyway,
That's good.
I just think it's fun.
You may have heard me say that I mentioned before that I had encephalitis back in the year 2007, and when I came out of encephalitis, I was in this really beautiful space for a few days. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days at least. There was just sort of, there was this very nice presence, would be the lack of a, actually in medical terms they call it ICU psychosis. But it was just this presence, and the thing which brought me back was the thought, you've got bills to pay. Right? I mean, you've got bills. I mean, that was the thing that brought the whole damn story back. Because then now you got to get well, you got to get out of here, you can't, you know, so. Yes. Yeah.
At no single instant does the body exist at all. It is always remembered or anticipated, but never experienced just now.
Right.
And I always remember I was in a bike accident, and I remember just before the accident happened, I actually flew off of the bicycle, and I remember seeing my hands on the
Bars.
bar, and then just lifted off. So I have the presence of that moment when you're never experienced until just now.
Right.
I remember that now, and I still am not sure. Did I black out?
Yeah.
You know, like what? I just disappeared.
Right.
At that moment, I didn't feel any pain or anything.
Right.
I did fall and slid, and
Right.
you know, several feet away, they found me. I came back, I guess. But at that moment, I didn't crash. At the instant before I crashed, I experienced the lifting out of myself. And I know when in car accidents, I've been in an almost car accident, you are just observing the accident. You can be very calm.
Sure.
And you say, "Oh, here comes a car at me,"
Yeah,
or
this
"Here's
is
the
what's
thing
happening.
spinning around," or
Yeah,
and you're just like eyeballs, just like you said, you're just observing it.
Yeah.
So it's but the peace doesn't leave you. It's usually afterwards, like you said, when you start thinking about the bills or the pain or what just happened.
Right.
In the happening of it, who is present?
That's a good question. That's kind of like Barry's question or Barry's observation too, that in the meditation, you know, he's able to get to this place of transcendence, right? But you're not experiencing it as you in the direct sense of what you would think of as your everyday you or your ego. So it's really nice that we have these experiences, that people do have them, that whether it happens with a any kind of accident. Very often these reports come out of accidents, where there's this transcendence right next to you.
And there's no time there.
There's no time, yeah.
Time,
yeah, that's right.
However many seconds or minutes, whatever it is,
right.
There's no time.
Right. Go ahead.
Hi. It's funny that you said that because last week I was walking across the street and I was hit by a car. And in that moment, I had this exact same experience. Mm-hmm. I just, that moment was so frozen and quiet. And then afterwards, I kind of felt the pain and broke down. But my question was more like, because everything has been about me, for me, since I was born.
Of course.
Has been my opinion on the color of the curtains, or my opinion on everything.
Sure.
It's filtered through my brain. So when I'm not me, what am I thinking? I mean, what could how, unless I'm in a meditation, I don't even know how to think anymore now that I'm reading the Course. And honestly, like I don't know how to like approach looking at a car now without a fear or of getting hit again, or
it doesn't have to be a fear. It can just be an awareness, a growing awareness that I should watch, and whatever it is that's going on, right?
Yeah.
Be fear.
But what's your daily thoughts? I mean, like, how do you not make it about yourself?
Right. That's a good question, because that is what this is about. Actually, the opening chapter in the new book of Perfect Happiness is called Who Wants to Know? And who wants to know is really the question that we're asking. Who's asking that question? That's the really interesting question. And who's the observer? So just keep in mind that where we're going here is that we're moving to the observer position more and more with the Course. So you're not trapped, you're not caught in the soap opera drama story that's going on for most everyone, most all the time. You're beginning to have enough of a transcendent awareness that there is something else, and that's just actually a very nice experience, right? It's actually connecting us back to the oneness. And that will probably keep happening as you continue to study the Course. I should hope that it would continue to happen. I think I've mentioned a friend of mine in the past who he spends his Sundays, rather than going to church, he meditates for 2 hours every Sunday, right? And he's having these beautiful transcendental experiences where he's not experiencing the body or anything, but he's this connection that is occurring, and this kind of awareness that's there is getting more profound all the time for him. As I said, I think one of the things that may have happened with Ken Wapnick, we're talking about, that he was so there that he went there, and that he stayed there. Eric, yeah, pass it down.
On that last question, I think if we look at the dissatisfaction of the thinking of me, when I'm thinking about me, it's all dissatisfaction. It's all me judging and finding lack and
fault.
And the opposite of that, just noticing when I'm dissatisfied, that I can choose to be grateful. And there's more to be grateful for. And then in that little me dissatisfaction, there's more to dislike. I mean, it's never ending, whichever one we choose.
Right. I was actually talking to another friend on the phone this week, and she was talking about a problem, and in relationship problems, she used the phrase, "I'm expecting the worst." And I thought, wow, expecting the worst to come out of this. That's the ego expects the worst out of whatever kind of the situation it is. And I have another good friend who's going to have a very serious operation, probably this week or next week, and was writing this morning. I said, what do I do? And I said, well, the only thing you can do is just trust. You have to really, really trust that this is the right thing, and that things are going to work out for you the way they will. But the ego doesn't trust. You know, the ego gets really kind of crazy around something like a serious operation, but it's going to go well enough, right? Remember, always remember, God really is in charge. You know, I mean, that's a part of the basic message of the Course in Miracles. And God really is in charge, and regardless of what kind of experience it is that we're having, it is the right experience, even when it looks like anything but the right experience. What we're learning is what we're really needing to learn. That's what Norma, where's Norma's question was like, why the hell are we still here? You know, obviously we're still here because we're still trying to learn something. Otherwise we wouldn't be. But thank God you've got this book, you've got this direction, you've got this path that we all understand is actually very clear. And if you think it's not clear, it's just because I was reading a section in the Course this last week, it might have been in chapter 10, where it talks a lot about clouded. The word clouded appears a lot. And the mind is so clouded, the thoughts are so clouded. And what they're clouded with are projections. They're so clouded with our projections that we can't see through the clouds. So where this is helping us to move to is a place of clarity, where there aren't any clouds, and the sun does shine, symbolically speaking now, right? Whereas so that brings us home again. Okay. Let's go to the bottom of page 3. Where we're talking about special love and special hate. Says, since you cannot not teach, your salvation lies in teaching the exact opposite of everything the ego believes, which is kind of what we're talking about here, right? So just keep in mind, we're always teaching, and we're always teaching all the time. You know, all of us. We're all, actually, that would have been a much better thing to have said on the flap of the book. It would have been a student teacher of a Course in Miracles, right? Rather than to say some sort of master teacher. Student, because we're all students, and we're all teachers all the time. Okay. So the idols are the things that we make up. They may also be the things of the world. I mean, literally the things of the world. I was watching an ad recently for, I think it was for an Acura car. And the way that that was being described, I thought, oh, I wish I could copy this down real quick here, because it was such a great description of an idol. Once an Acura, always an Acura. You know? You know, but the words that were being used, powerful, elegant, graceful, you know, just as this all of this. And I remember, I think I tell a story in here somewhere about, I had gone to do a talk at a church someplace in the South, and I stayed with the minister, woman minister, and her husband, and it doesn't matter who this is, I won't mention, but it was quite a while ago anyhow, and he had just bought a brand new 52,000, I think it was, BMW, and she was mad as hell at him about that. But he said he had just been promoted at his job to middle management, and he thought it was important that he demonstrate the right look, you know, that he look like somebody who would be driving the BMW. And well, okay, so he got the BMW, and $800 a month for the next 7 years. But it's just the image, just creating the image, buying an image, right? Yeah, Barry. Yeah. Hi, he's got one here, and you can go there.
I'd like to share with everybody an experience I've had that I think would be very useful to some people. A couple of years ago, I'm a big fan of this voice within me. And I asked this voice within me, how can I be happy? How can I be healthy? How can I have an easy life? And then I just calmed myself down and waited for an answer. And moments later, all of a sudden, I felt a stillness in the center of my heart, my chest, where my heart is. And that makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
And I find that I use it today when I'm really having disturbing thoughts. I come back to the center in my chest and it calms me down. And I thought about it, if I can get out of this deep concern I have for the future, by just listening to this voice, making a real determined effort every single moment to listen to this voice within.
Exactly.
It's a way of getting away. The only problem is I'm like addicted to my comfort zone, because I've told myself a number of times that to listen to this voice within takes an awful lot of guts. You got to really be able to, I think you got to be desperate to want to change your ways to, I'm speaking of my own experience, to just listen, make your full-time job to listen to this voice within.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm in my comfort zone, you know, and I think you just got to be desperate to want to change.
Yeah, right. You're really talking Course right now. I mean, you're talking Course. I mean, the Course says, there's a section in the new book which is called "The Course in Miracles is All About," and I say it's all about this, and a couple of paragraphs, and another heading, "Course in Miracles is all about," and a couple more paragraphs. They're all different. They're all the same. But certainly, one of the main things that the Course in Miracles is all about, it's all about listening to this voice. Except it's identified in the Course as the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is just a symbolic word, phraseology. Ultimately speaking, there's no Holy Spirit, but it's a nice way to talk about it, the Holy Spirit, being the guide that's there for us, which is really the voice that we listen to 99.9% of the time, which is obviously the voice of the ego. So, but you're right there about that desperate part too, because the Course says, and I think it's even in chapter 10 at one point, it says, you have to really want to do it. And you got to really want, you got to be willing to make the commitment to listen and to make the commitment to hearing, because otherwise we can just continue to keep the dream alive. And as long as I keep the dream alive, I'm not really paying attention. There's that, well, I'm sure I've shared this with you from before, but just page 448 about the responsibility for sight, but I just want to read you one line from there. And that is the line which says, so it's chapter 21, section 2. This is the only thing you need to do for vision, happiness, release from pain, the complete escape from sin, all to be given you. Say only this, so there's something you say. And then the next line is a really important line. But mean it with no reservation. So what you say, it's like you not only have to say this, you have to mean it with no reservation. If you say this and you mean it with no reservation, and then it says, for herein the power of salvation lies. Now you probably, I know I read this here once before, but let me read it again. I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience. I decide upon the goal I would achieve. And everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for. And I receive as I have asked. That's what you say. But you have to say this, you have to mean it with no reservation. Let me read you just a little bit more of this, and then we'll go to Kim. Deceive yourself no longer. You are helpless in the face of what is done to you. Acknowledge if you've been mistaken. All effects of your mistake will disappear. It's impossible the Son of God, that's you, be merely driven by events outside of him. It's impossible that happenings to come to him are not his choice. His power of decision is determined of every situation in which he finds himself by chance or accident. And the next great line, no accident or chance is possible within the universe as God created it, outside of which is nothing. Suffer, and you decide sin was your goal. Be happy, and you give the power of decision to him who must decide for God for you. But you've got to really want it. It's got to be, that's why sometimes people, unfortunately, we could say, get into these really desperate situations, like with alcoholism or some sort of an addiction, any kind of addiction, where it just gets so incredibly bad that they just throw up their hands. The first step in AA is you recognize you need help. You can't handle it. It's out of control, right?
Eckhart Tolle, suicidal depression.
Right, right. Kim, you want to pass it back? Are you in the same one? Okay, take that one. Okay.
Yeah, just what you just said. There is no way out of this dream but surrender. That's it. And that's why those who seem particularly cursed in terms of stories in this world are the ones who are really primed for awakening. Because as you brought up, you've got to be really desperate. And even when you are, and I mean, in my personal experience, I can attest to this. The veil is parting. It has taken me 20 to 25 years of unequivocal, absolute desperation and determination for an answer to the level of suffering that I had been enduring. And
Sure.
It does part, but that's why it's just so pointless to judge what anybody's going through in this world, because the hardest things and the biggest challenges are the things that kind of put our back to the wall and precipitate, that coming to the knees and asking for an alternative. And just what Barry was saying, it's so funny. I just read today, I want to read something out of the Course.
Okay.
Because there's two parts of it that were talked about today. You talked about the clouds, and there's a quote that really struck me recently. I've been looking up all the references of the fog. This is one of the ego devices for keeping us asleep, and maintaining the status quo and the sense of separation. And he talks about the clouds, dense and obscuring, but representing all you see. All of it, everything we see, all form, all materiality. This is our projection of life and separation, which God didn't create. All we see, the clouds coming from our thoughts, which are not the thoughts that are not true.
So in terms of what we're talking about today, these are also the idols.
And in the Bible, that thing about creation groans, desperate for our awakening, because we are impinging upon true creation, upon ourself, these images, which are full of pain and suffering. And this, what I want to read from the Course, it's from Let Me Remember I'm One with God, Barry in his meditation, and that's what we're striving for.
Right.
It says, today we would experience ourselves at one with Him, so that the world may share our recognition of reality. In our experience, the world is freed. As we deny our separation from our Father, it is healed along with us. So as we withdraw all the false beliefs which project unreality and all of this suffering, the light within us is released, and that light is extended to all things. And what emerges is a world that reflects heaven. And which the Course says merges into it. And I'll just finish. The note in the margin I made was, if you want results, you will have them in proportion to your willingness to do this, meaning sit down and seek to remember you are one with God, above and beyond all worldly preoccupations. Let them go and turn to this with devotion, determination, diligence, and consistency. The veil will part by your own intent. Your really unequivocal turning to Source will raise you to recognition of union. Decide for God, for me. Assure me of your presence, my truth, the reality of all-pervading, all-encompassing, only love, all and only. Right. So simply do this, and if we do sincerely and with all of our heart, the veil does part, and we have that experience. So anyway.
Thanks, Kim. But like I said, you got to do it. You got to really want to do it.
You got to totally
want it. That's the willingness, that's the little willingness, and it's actually more. There's really two ways in which that might occur. One is because the world just falls apart, and we have to look at another possibility, which I was really talking about being famous, for example, is that you get everything. And then once you get everything, you realize, that's it? I mean, you know, remember that old song, if that's all there is, then let's keep dancing, because this isn't answering the questions for me either. We can go either way to home. Shanti, do you want to share something?
Yeah, just a bit. I just want to know, Kim, what section were you reading from?
Oh, that was lesson 124. Let me remember I am one with God.
Okay. You know, in the very beginning, when you start the course, it says all we're asking for is a little willingness. And now we're talking about, and what Kim brings forth, and what was really alluded to before, is very clearly saying your intention has to be unequivocal. And that's the secret. It's not a little willingness. It's that you're completely committed to this. So you're going to get many moments of desperation or discouragement. Don't let it throw you. If you really, really are committed, carry on. Lots of luck.
And this is why you can't have, you can't worship God and mammon. There can't be both. Both doesn't work, right? Right. There's a line in the Course where it says you can't be completely devoted sometimes.
John,
yeah.
Let me add one thing to what you just said. That unequivocal desire to awaken does not take time.
No,
we
of
can
course not.
awaken this holy instant in this holy instant. So that's another device of the ego, thinking, oh, this is going to take a long time. We've got a lot to learn.
Right.
We can awaken right now.
That's why the Course says, heaven is here. There's no place else. And heaven is now. There's no other time. And why wait for heaven? You know, why wait for heaven? Why are we putting it off? You know, we're putting it off because we like to live within the ego framework and the ego world. Well, the ego wants to tell us that that's true. You know, we're constantly kind of being seduced back into the world once again. Yeah, see?
I have a
Jack, go ahead.
polite little joke.
Wait, you gotta, it's all right.
I have a polite little joke about an actor.
Okay.
And his agent tells him out in California that he has an audition for a big part, and he has to drive to the studio. And he's just, oh, I'm going to get this part. I know. And he starts driving there, and all of a sudden he gets a call on his cell phone from the agent, and the agent says, Joe, be careful. There's news, it's on the radio and on TV that someone is driving the wrong way on the Hollywood freeway. And he says, oh, I know. In fact, there are hundreds of them.
Being a little preoccupied, right? All right, let's go to page 5 for a moment, and let's look at being at home with God. Okay. I'm going to read a part from the Course. It says, you do not know your creation simply because you would decide against them as long as your mind is split. The main problem is what you're really saying is that we do have these split minds, that they're the divided mind. The Course is trying to help us to have come to one-mindedness. And to attack what you have created is impossible. But remember that it is as impossible for God. It's impossible for God to be split. Just as it's, ultimately it's impossible for us to be split as well, right? And then I want to read at the bottom of 5 and going on to 6. You are at home in God, dreaming of exile, but perfectly capable of awakening to reality. Is this your decision to do so? It's just a matter of a decision. You recognize from your own experience that what you see in dreams you think is real while you are asleep. Now, when we do that, whenever you're dreaming, it seems like these events really are occurring. Yet the instant you awake, you realize that everything that seemed to happen in the dream did not happen at all. Right? You do not think this strange. even though the laws of what you awaken to were violated while you slept. So while we sleep, we can have all kinds of, you can fly in dreams, right? Things morph in dreams. So it's like you're in a car, no, you're on a bus, which actually you're on a train. Somehow or another, these things that are completely unrealistic in what we would call ordinary, everyday awakened life, that can happen within the dream, and in the dream it seems like the events are really occurring, but they're not. And then we wake up and we go, well, it was just a dream. None of that actually happened or has any reality to it. And then finishing that piece, is it not possible that you merely shifted from one dream to another without really awakening? Which is why I say I think that what happens to us when we die, it's really like that. Hi, welcome. Okay. And then the bottom of 6 and on to 7. You remember everything the instant you desire it wholly. That's what we're talking about, right? The instant you desire it wholly. For if to desire it wholly is to create, you will have willed away the separation, returning your mind simultaneously to Creator and to your creations. It's just like, it's really waking up. It's just a matter, it's just coming home and being home. That's why there really is no reason to be afraid of dying. I mean, not if it's an awakening to reality. That's why when you read any of these near-death experiences, almost nobody wants to come back, because coming back is coming back to limitation. And the only ones that do come back, where most people go, because we don't know about the ones that go. We only know about the ones that come back. And the ones that come back will always come back saying that they have a mission, otherwise they wouldn't have come back. It's the mission that brings them back. David?
I have a question about creations.
Okay.
Just read this, one or two things from the text.
Okay.
David, you have a microphone?
Is there one on that side of the room? I keep one on one side. There you go, Christian.
It's helpful for the
Yeah.
I mean, you just read returning your mind simultaneously to your Creator and your creations, and then knowing them are true creations. Then the text it says, the law of creation is that you love your creations as yourself because they are part of you. Do you not know your creations simply because you would decide against them, etc., etc.? In fact, every chapter is, I would say, replete
Probably.
with references to creations.
Creations. And you're going to ask what creations are,
what
right?
are my creations?
Yes,
I mean,
right.
I could make some assumptions about what they are.
Right.
I mean,
The Course never says exactly what creations are, but one thing I think that we can be assured, it's whatever comes out of love. Whatever comes out of love is a true creation. We shouldn't take it too literal, by not like creation as we would think of creation within the context of this world.
well, I realize we're not creating a painting or creating a pottery or something.
No.
I sort of thought of it in terms of love that emanates from the Holy Spirit within me.
That's good.
Because the
I like
ego
that.
certainly can love and create as well,
Right.
but it's not to
Right.
create this.
Not a physical creation,
Right.
necessarily. Although I think that you could draw some parallel when you think about if you're putting your love into whatever you're creating in the world as well.
That's true.
There's something similar to that, although it's not a physical thing that we're talking about. Lilycuts, here, give the, right there.
In the first place where I studied Course in Miracles, somebody had asked that question, and he gave an example of like opening a door for somebody. It was just an example.
Yeah, that's a good example. So you're doing something, but it's nothing. I mean, it's not like not like you're making something.
Right.
Yeah. Eric, right behind you. Oh, here you go.
I think it's helpful to realize that there's no other choice. That there is, we can put our energy into loving communication, or we can put our energy into illusion, and that's all. That's the only choice. I mean, so choosing for that, deciding what am I going to choose for, becomes pretty obvious that what you want to choose for.
Loving creation is a very, I think, or loving communication, you said, is a really good way to look at that. All right. Whereas what really much of our energy is put into just the opposite of that, which is finding some problems with the world. And we spend more time, that creates the illusion rather than...
What about my money? My money is funny. I can't...
Yeah, I've got it. All right, let's read a little bit more from the let's go to page 7. Everything is a choice. A quote from Ken Wapnick: reality does not need our decision, but awareness of reality depends on our decision. Knowing them, our creations, we're talking about here, you will have no wish to sleep, but only the desire to awaken and be glad. Dreams will be impossible because you will want only truth, and being at last your will, it will be yours. And let's look at the decision to forget. Unless you first know something, you cannot dissociate from it. Knowledge must precede dissociation, so the dissociation is nothing more than a decision to forget. Now let's talk about, there's a function in psychology that's known as dissociation. So dissociation is when we break off, or when we don't look at, in a negative sense of the term. Sometimes people that go through like a child that's abused will dissociate the situation, and then that will produce problems later on in life. In this case, what the Course is talking about is that we have all dissociated from God. We have all split ourselves off from God. It's been our choice to disassociate that, to kind of pretend like God doesn't exist or isn't there, right? So as long as we don't see it, as long as we don't think about it, as long as we don't remember it, the Course is helping to realize that actually you've never left God, and you can't dissociate from what is real. You can't dissociate from truth. Now I'm going to finish reading this, and then we'll go to you, Barry. Whatever has been forgotten then appears to be fearful, but only because the dissociation is an attack on truth. You are fearful because you have forgotten, and you have replaced your knowledge by an awareness of dreams because you are afraid of your dissociation, not what you have dissociated. When what you dissociate is accepted, it ceases to be fearful. So we were actually afraid of God, but there's no need to be doing that. And back to the first sentence, and you will have replaced your knowledge by an awareness of dreams because you're afraid of your dissociation. It's the awareness of, really awareness of how much of our time is really spent separating, dividing, dreaming, caught in an illusionary world. That's what the Course is trying to help us to do consistently, is wake up and become aware of how much you are dreaming, because it's only when we become aware of how much that we're dreaming that we can begin to awaken from the dream. Barry, and then we're going to take a break. I don't know where the mic is, on this side of the room? We should have one on this side. Okay, here it is, right there. There you go.
Seems to me you're saying that the role of love is the way to awaken, but it has to be love for God. Is that true?
That's true, but then love for God is the love for everything.
No, without including everything. But
Okay.
I mean, if you somehow, I know in my case, I once asked a priest, his lecture was about, don't intellectualize about God, love God.
Okay, that sounds good.
So I went up to him during the intermission and I asked him, how do I love God? No response. But it seems to me that the way to awaken, to get out of our comfort zone, to become desperate, is to love God to such an extent that we're willing to listen to this voice within, call it the Holy Voice, whatever you want. The name is not important.
Right.
What's important is to listen to it.
That's right. But what I meant by, you know, how do we love God? We love God by loving our brothers and our sisters, but realizing that we're whole, realizing there's one, realizing it's a complete totality, that's all. Yeah. Let's take a 10-minute break.
Always blame somebody else. That's fine.
Okay, let's go to page 9. I'll just be reading from the Course for a little bit, then talk about it. To remember is merely to restore to your mind what is already there. And remember, there's another line that I've mentioned before, I'm sure, it's called, everyone already knows. So we already know the truth. It's already, so we are just, that's why we're awakening to it, or as when Kim read a while ago, she used the word recognize. You did that. We're just recognizing. That's why there's nothing to be afraid of in awakening. And quite the opposite is true. Is that I started today by telling you about 2 recent dreams that were little fearful elements in them, that I realized what I had to do within the dream was just to wake up. And if I would just wake up, then it would stop. Then the insanity that was in the dream would stop. And that's true, it just stopped. If you're awake, it's no longer there, right? Whatever is fearful. And then going on down. You do not make what you remember, you merely accept again what is already there, but was rejected. That's the dissociation that we were talking about before. We dissociated ourselves off from God. We dissociated ourselves off from the idea of wholeness. Right? So all we're doing is just remembering, putting the pieces back together again. All attack is self-attack. It cannot be anything else. Arising from your own decision not to be what you are. It is an attack on your identification. We attack our identification by trying to create another reality, a false reality, that we then, that's the pretense that we think that we are. And in stories like the Marilyn Monroe case, it becomes so incredibly artificial that it just simply cannot be maintained. There's no happiness that can be there at all. Attack is thus the way in which you identify, and if identification is lost, because when you attack, you must have forgotten what you are. And if your reality is God, when you attack, you are not remembering Him. How could you attack a brother or a sister that you love? In fact, you do love them. You can't help but loving them in the deepest core of who you are. So if you're attacking them, you're saying that you don't love them, even though that's not true, right? You always hurt the ones you love, the song, right? This is not because He's gone, but because you are actively choosing not to remember Him, God. We're actively choosing not to remember God. You know, the word God appears in the Course 2,200 times. The word ego appears 475 times. It gives you a little bit of a juxtaposition between the two, where the emphasis is on, where we're trying to get back to the memory of the 2,207 times compared to 475 times. If you realize the complete havoc this makes of your peace of mind, that is trying to reject God and create another world, you cannot make an insane decision. You make it only because you still believe it can get you something you want. It follows then what you want something other than peace of mind. That you want something other than peace of mind. But you have not considered what it must be. Yet the logical outcome of your decision is perfectly clear. If you will only look at it, by deciding against your reality, you have made yourself vigilant against the kingdom of God. So there's another point in the Course where it asks us to be vigilant only for God and His kingdom. And Jesus says that also in the Scriptures as well. Be vigilant, watch, and be vigilant only for God and His kingdom. There's only one kingdom. And let's go to 10, about the God of sickness a little bit. You have not attacked God, and you do love Him. You can't attack God. How could you possibly attack God? You can only try to attack God. God cannot be attacked. God has no ego. God could not possibly be hurt. God does not experience attack. Can you change your reality? No one can will to destroy himself When you think you're attacking yourself, it is a sure sign that you hate what you think you are, and this, and only this, a false image of myself, can be attacked. What you think you are can be very hateful, and what this strange image makes you do can be very destructive. Yet the destruction is no more real than the image. All those who make idols do worship them. The idols are nothing, but their worshippers are the Son of God in sickness. The Son of God in sickness is whenever it is that we're placing something of value over God Himself. Kim, you want to give it?
Super brief. I think
All right, super brief. No, go ahead, but for the sake of the video.
Just to be really clear, when the idols, this self, the body form personality, is an idol. All of us, as we perceive ourselves in body form personality identity, these are idols.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I just wanted to really clarify, because I don't know if everyone realizes that we in self-identity, these are the idols we made up that obscures our spiritual reality and oneness.
Yeah, that's the primary idol that we started talking about today. Right? That's the thing that the thing that we think that we are, which has no reality. That's why the whole thing is a dream. That's why your nighttime dreams and your daytime dreams just have a different form, and why we're very, very caught up in thinking that this thing looks very, very real. This is why the Course is really waking us up to see the reality of the truth that we have created. You know, I love it in lesson 132. It says, there is no world. There's not even a world. This is the central thought this Course attempts to teach. Another way that says it says there's no outside. There's nothing outside of you. Not in your body, it's your mind. So what is the mind creating? The mind can create a very artificial world. It's pretty obvious. Just look around and we see how incredibly artificial the world can be. Watch ads on television. It's pretty obvious how artificial the world can be. But there is a truth. Barry gets to it in his meditations. We all get to it in our meditations, and you get to it when you're flying off the bicycle. You know, there's all kinds of times when it can come back to us. The task is being able to get there and to stay there, to hold it, to hold on to this awareness with such incredible and impeccable peace that nothing can take a piece of God away from us at any time, even when it maybe looks like there's something that could. Okay, going down to the did I read the top of 10 yet? No. Yeah, I did. All right. So I'm going to go to 11. To believe a Son of God is sick is to worship the same idol He does. God created love, not idolatry. All forms of idolatry are caricatures of creation. Taught by 6 minds divided to know that creation shares power and never usurps it. I checked out to see that is the only time the word caricature appears in the Course. And what a caricature is, of course, is it's just an image of some like cartoon characters or Obama with big ears or something, right? So we create these caricatures. It's not, that's why Marilyn Monroe says, I am not a sex goddess. A sex goddess is a thing, and I am not a thing. I'm not a thing. I'm not a character. You know, that anybody that got made into a character, she got made into a character, right? And it bugged her. Einstein got made into a character, but it didn't bother him. You know, you can kind of go to either way that you want to go with it. You can make it real or not real, right? Okay, let's go on down a bit further. I was, last summer I reread Somerset Maugham's The Razor's Edge. And he was really kind of talking about how the body could be a kind of caricature that we create. I just thought this passage from Somerset Maugham was, that's on the top of 12 was interesting. he's talking. This is Larry Darrell, who was the main character in the Razor's Edge, is talking. He says, I remember after a battle seeing a pile of dead French soldiers heaped upon one another. They looked like the marionettes of a bankrupt puppet show that had been cast pell-mell into a dusty corner because they were of no use anymore. I thought then the dead looked so awfully dead, right? Because they're nothing. You know, the body is absolutely nothing. That's why Ken did not want to have a memorial service for him. That's why he would, I love Ken tremendously, as you know, but I thought maybe kind of overdid it just a little bit. He wouldn't have his birthday celebrated. I remember being at Roscoe on the occasion of his 50th birthday, and we were in the room, and we wanted to sing happy birthday to him, but he snuck off before we had a chance to do it, because that was just, you know, we make hullabaloos about birthdays, we make a lot about the death of someone after they die, and maybe it's just best that the last time you saw them is the last time you saw them, and that's okay, and you don't really need anything more than that. Let's go on to 12 a little bit. Yet is the body prisoner and not the mind. The body thinks no thoughts. It has no power to learn, to pardon or enslave. It gives no orders that the mind needs serve. Am I fading in and out? Back row. Back row.
Thank you. I just wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more on the section on sickness in the section that you're going into.
Go ahead.
Right now, because you know, to believe that a son of God can be sick is to believe that part of God can suffer. This is a part that no matter what I do, I always get lost in.
You're not alone.
And I just wondered if you could elaborate a little bit more on that, because I mean, I know that the most loving people, you know, can be, I mean,
I know, get sick, right?
And
right.
I just need to understand it a little better.
I think we all do. I mean, I think we all do in the sense that, quote, we all get sick. At the same time that we all get sick, we also know the incredible power of the mind to change things, right? Somebody sent me just 2 or 3 days ago a TED Talk by a doctor on the power of the mind to heal, and the use of placebos, for example, and how a number of people got healed with placebos, being told that this was a thing that was going to cure them, which simply proves that the power of the mind is there. Now, for each and every one of us, the way I know I'm not enlightened, and why that was a mistake to say master teacher of the course, right, is because for personally, the deeper I go, the more stuff I realize there is to look at. You know, I mean, the more stuff that's kind of coming up. And one of the ways that probably is manifest for all of us is in terms of illness. So I think that we know that on the one hand that the mind can override all that, and it does override all that. We've all probably had experiences of the mind overriding that where it's just not there. But really, who knows the depth? You know, people were saying to Ken during the last 3-4 months of his life, save yourself. I mean, if there's anybody that, you know, had the mind that he'd never been sick a day in his life, so, you know, why didn't he do it? Well, I don't think we know the answer to that. I mean, I don't think we can answer that. I think it's like the Course says the script is written and the time is decided already. So if the script is written and the time is decided already, then it was time. And the script, that part of that particular script was over. At the same time that that's true, who knows how much power, how much that we've prevented maybe in our own lives. We're just not going to go there. Well, that's what we say to ourselves. I mean, psychologically speaking, I'm not going to go there, and then we don't go there. We just don't give into it. We don't surrender to it. It goes, and it goes away. If you look what happened to Anita Morjani, for example, with her book, Dying to Be Me, she realizes in the middle of this experience, not only that she's going to come back, she said, but she realized that she would be well within days or weeks even at the most. And that's exactly what happened. But there was some kind of realization that occurred in there in her mind. At the time I had cancer several years ago, it may have been true for Shanti or some of the rest of you who've had cancer too, I just never believed it was going to get me. I just, even though it would spread, I just never believed it. And I don't know what how to explain that. And it didn't. Right? So tough question, John. I think everybody in the room will agree that it's a tough question. Kim, you got an insight? Give a mic to Kim.
To believe that a son of God can be sick is to believe that a part of God can suffer. Obviously, what we would conceive as an all-powerful, infinite, all-loving creator could neither be sick nor suffer, and love creates. One of the laws, Jesus says, is law within the Course is love only creates like itself. Love is incapable of, God is incapable of creating anything not of and like God. It's all of itself. There's nothing else. I mean, that's the first commandment, really, is the trick.
It is, yeah.
I am the Lord thy God. There is none else. You know, worship God truly with that faith that you had when you had cancer, the appearance of cancer. So in the workbook lessons, there's a number of lessons that say basically the same thing. I will forgive. And this will disappear. And what forgiveness is standing in the midst of the appearance, which seems so real, whether it's your own physical pain or suffering or illness, or you know, beholding someone close to you or anyone going through some kind of this suffering. And it's the willingness within yourself. And part of it is having spiritually evolved enough to be able to stand there in the midst of it with this awareness. So it's always a matter of gaining awareness, you know, pulling ourselves out from under the dense clouds of the ego and that weight and the gravity of it. It's the belief in the materiality and the identification with ego and with the materiality. Now, the ego is the denial of God. It is the idea that we can create unlike God. And so the ego will never admit that sickness is, that all of this is false and illusion, because it's what the ego made, and the ego strives only to maintain our belief in this crazy picture of separation, because it is what blasphemy is. It's the denial of God. So to the extent that we can, through our practice, through our study, gain separation from that belief that I actually am this, and anyone else actually is this, we can stand in the face of anything, and it's the Holy Spirit looking, and that's the light that heals and that dissolves error. And what forgiveness is understanding literally that it's illusion that we're beholding. It's not real. It has no actual gravity and power, but God does, and that's the faith, that's the true faithfulness, where you're not under the spell, the mesmeric spell that this has reality. And it's very challenging because we feel the pain of the body and we witness it with the physical eyes. But over and over, Jesus says, everything physical sight beholds is made of fear. It's all made of fear.
Right. And that's why there is no outside. I got an email from somebody, a doctor, this week, saying, yeah, but how do you forgive? You know, it's like, that's like the big, and it's like, it's not that I answered him in a page or so, but really said, you can't really, I can tell you how, I can tell you what the mechanisms are, I can tell you what happens, but I can't make it happen for you. You know, I can't make you, you know, all the forgiveness is, for example, it's just letting go. That's all it is. It's just very, very simple. It's just letting go. It's not seeing a problem here. There's no problem here. But how do you can't do that in somebody else's mind. You know, and the same thing is, you know, only we are in charge of what's going on within the context of our minds. Whether that's healing or whether it's forgiving, which are, as Kim just said, are linked together. Diana, rather, I keep trying to change Diana's name.
Thanks, John. In this context, the image of Jesus on the cross came to me. And the words, Father, forgive them.
I don't know what they did.
And I think if we wrestle with what does illusion mean? We can get confused.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus bled, probably hurt, and he forgave. Mm-hmm. And forgive them, they know not what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can, I look there to try to understand your question.
Right, okay.
I don't try to look for the end of illness, I try to look for what kind of presence.
Right.
What kind of presence can hang on a cross and look down and say, forgive them, they know not what they do. I want to do that with my own pain and my own suffering.
Good, very good. And Eric, and then we'll come back, and then I want to begin to wrap up, actually. Okay, here.
Yeah, I think there's a real problem with thinking that I have cancer and I brought that on myself. And now I'm guilty because I brought cancer on myself. There's a paradox here that we're all going to die, apparently, of something. So we don't know what this illness is, but I don't know what this means, but I know that I am not that illness. So I am still here, and I am maybe in pain or whatever it is, but there's no mental anguish. There's no suffering necessary.
Good
that
point.
is the choice.
Yes, good point. Good point. Okay. I'm just going to read from 13, and I'm going to stop, and we'll look at the cards, and then I want to lead a meditation, and we'll begin to wrap up. From 13, I do not bring God's message with the deception, and you will learn this as you learn that you always receive as much as you accept. Isn't that a great line? You could accept peace now for everyone and offer them perfect freedom from all illusions because you hear His voice. But have no other gods before Him, or you will not hear. So think of all the other gods that we throw up ahead of us as blocks to the awareness of love's presence, whatever those are, and there are myriad forms of them that appear out there in the world. But mostly it's just our projections. And it's our own thoughts that we're throwing out there. God is not jealous of the gods you made, but you are. All right? You would save them and serve them because you believe that they made you. You think they are your father because you are projecting onto them the fearful fact that you made them to replace God. I'll stop at that point there, okay? Let's go to the end of sickness on 14, and then we will wrap it up. This is one of the reasons for the title of the book, Perfect Happiness. It comes from this section here. If God created you perfect, you are perfect. If you believe you can be sick, you have placed other gods before Him. God is not war with the God of sickness you made, but you are. Reality can dawn only on an unclouded mind. There's the clouds again. It's always there to accept, but its acceptance depends on your willingness to have it. To know reality must involve the willingness to judge unreality for what it is. To overlook nothingness is merely to judge it correctly, and because of your ability to evaluate it truly, to let it go. To overlook nothing is merely to judge it correctly. It's nothing, right? We're holding on to nothing. That's why the great section from lesson 189, hold on to nothing, right? Knowledge cannot dawn on a mind full of illusion. So the real task is just really becoming aware of how much illusion we carry around with us all the time, and how easy it is to buy into the illusion of the world, in the news, on television, all over the place, how we have so much communication now, so much contact. It would really be a little bit easier if we were more natural and had more time for quiet. That's why people go into monasteries and to the idea is you're going in there to get away from the insanity of the world. Well, I think I told the story in here somewhere about going to a monastery. I was giving a talk in Indianapolis, Indiana, and the custodian at this church came up to me afterwards and said he used to be a monk in a monastery in Iowa, and he said what happened was we went inside the monastery and we created another world, right? But it was also an insane world because it was all about the abbot and what an SOB the abbot was and how they all hated the abbot and they just couldn't stand this guy, right? And he had his favorites, and they, of course, were supporting him. But then there was this. It was all fractioned and split because there was others who were opposing him. And he said one day he went to the front door of the monastery, put on his work clothes, as though he was going to go out and work in a shed, and went to the front door and just opened the door and started walking, and he never turned around and looked back. Right? Because it's just another world. So we keep creating these insane worlds. You could create an insane world even in a place which was deliberately established to get away from the world. Right? So the world is always inside our heads and whatever we're creating. But we can let that go. That's kind of answers kind of the question you were asking, Norma, at the break about doing things like watching the news and whether you can do that completely dispassionately, just realizing that this is an insane world, and it has always been an insane world, and it will always be an insane world because it is the world, because it is the ego's world. And that's why it's never a matter of fixing the world, because it's only a matter of fixing the perceiver of the world. If the perceiver of the world changes, everything changes. So Jesus can say, God, forgive them, they don't know what they do. It's 1:15 and we have to be in about 10 minutes, and I want to do a meditation. But first of all, for 5 minutes, anybody have those cards that you got in your handout today that, I always like, so you want to share? Yes, what'd your card say? Isn't that great? Yeah, just say it louder.
Illness is some form of external searching. Health is inner peace.
Illness is some sort of external searching. Health is inner peace. Right? And I might add that I think that would be true even if, let's say, I'm in a body that's dying. Right? So I may be in a body that's dying from whatever, just because it's so darn old. That I can't be holding on to it anymore, but I can be completely at peace and accepting of the fact that this body is dying.
I think illness and disease can be an opportunity to accept and do whatever you need to do.
Absolutely. Right. Somebody else want to share your card? A couple more? Yes, Tina.
You cannot answer.
Okay.
Hi. You cannot enter into real relationships with any of God's sons unless you love them all. Unless you love them all and equally. Love is not special.
Right.
Sums it up.
So it doesn't make any difference to you. We create a lot of special relationships that way. That doesn't mean that you don't love your husband or your wife with, total compassion or whatever, right? Hopefully you do. But it's not exclusive in that sense. Lilycuts?
You have the right to all the universe, to perfect peace, complete deliverance from all effects of sin, and to the life eternal, joyous and complete in every way, as God appointed for His Holy Son.
Good. Anybody else? Right behind Lilycuts here.
The great peace of the kingdom shines in your mind forever, but it must shine outward to make you aware of it.
Right. David, you want to hand David the mic there?
The healing of God's Son is all the world is for. That is the only purpose the Holy Spirit sees in it, and thus the only one it has.
And who is God's Son? Well, you are, David. Yeah. Yeah, we are. You are. Everyone is. Anybody else? Here, Sandra.
Everything you teach, you are learning. Teach only love, and learn that love is yours, and you are love.
Right. That's why it would have been better on the front end of my book if it said student teacher of A Course in Miracles. Right? And behind you, Michael?
God does not change his mind about you, for he is not uncertain of himself. When anything threatens your peace of mind, ask yourself, has God changed his mind about me?
Isn't that a great one? I mean, there's so many. Just think, this book is such an incredible book. I mean, how many books can we could just find quote after quote after quote after quote, and they all have this incredible power about them. There's not a line in this whole book that you kind of go, well, that's sort of silly. Or you may not understand it, but you wouldn't say it was silly. Lillicuts?
There's another good quote about health that I don't have it memorized exactly, but it's something to the effect of good health is the result of relinquishing all attempts to use the body lovelessly.
Lovelessly, yes. Right. Okay.
Can I share?
Oh, yes, sure, Brad, please. Yeah, give him, let's, yeah, please. Yeah, do this.
Yeah, I wanted
Stay
to,
here.
Okay. I wanted to share one thing with all of you, only for learning purposes. I didn't come up here to be a victim for sure, but my mother passed away on Good Friday, and I went through a week of walking through a fog so dense that I felt the deepest sleep I've ever experienced while I was here in the body. And I spent the weekend with John at Easter. He invited me up to his house, and it was a lovely weekend, but then when I came back home, I fell deeper. And it was completely unexpected. I didn't expect or have any anticipation on how I was going to feel with my mother's passing. But then 4 days ago, in this deep sense of loss, I asked myself a question: what am I mourning? And I just sat still. And so many things from the Course in Miracles came flooding through this open gate. And it's so much of what John talked about in this class today, and I just wanted to touch on a few. I asked John on this ride up here, what was my mother? You know, what was my mother? And she was two major things for me. She was my greatest special relationship, and she was my greatest teacher of love. And so now I had a decision to make. Which one of those was I going to keep? And I went to bed 4 nights ago, and I closed my eyes, and I said, Jesus, I'm making the decision to mourn no more. I would like to give this pain to you because I don't understand what it is. And when I wake, I hope to rise with a new outlook on this life. And I did indeed. I woke with a new remembrance I was reminded where my salvation lies. And my salvation lies in my mother, how I see my mother. So what was I deciding to look at, her body or her spirit? And I freed myself. And so my card says, everything is for your own best interest. So if that process was for my own best interest, what was it? It was an opportunity for me, nothing more, for me to further my awakening process. My mother lives on. She did not die. The body was laid aside, and in her final breath, she gave me my own. Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Brad. So we're going to do a 5-minute meditation now before we close. So if you want to get quiet, close your eyes, put your feet on the floor, take a couple of deep breaths, relax, and just be very present. I want the peace of God. To say these words is nothing. To mean these words is everything. If you meant them for just an instant, there would be no further sorrow possible. Heaven would be completely given back to full awareness, memory of God entirely restored, and the resurrection of all creation recognized. No one can say these words and mean them and not be healed. I want the peace of God. Two minds with one intent become so strong that what they will become, the will of God, minds can only join in truth. You want the peace of God is to renounce all fearful dreams. No one means these words who wants illusions and dreams of sin, sadness, sorrow, and despair. Put now all such dreaming by. I want the peace of God. The mind which means that all it wants is peace must join with other minds, for that is how peace is obtained. When the wish for peace is genuine, the means for finding it is given. I want the peace of God. Say these words slowly with me now. I want the peace of God. And one more time. I want the peace of God. This is no idle wish. What you are truly asking for in your heart, what will comfort you. I want the peace of God. No compromise is possible in this. We choose God's peace, or we ask for illusion. Dreams will come as you request them, yet will God's peace come and will remain with you forever. You want the peace of God. And so do all who seem to seek for dreams. You've been weak at times, uncertain in your purpose, unsure of what you wanted, where to look for it, and where to turn for help. Help has been given you. Avail yourself of it by sharing it. I want the peace of God. No one who seeks the peace of God can fail to find it. No gift of God can be unshared. No one can lose, and everyone must gain whenever any gift of God has been requested and received by anyone. God gives but to unite. Say with me one more final time. I want the peace of God. Amen. Thank you. We will see you on June 8th. Thanks.